What's up, y'all? It's your boy. I've been in discussions via text with a group of friends that I've known for over 20 years. It's a very diverse group, and we talk about a ton of topics ranging from politics, science, economics, religion. I mean, nothing's sacred with this group. A conversation just started up that brought to my attention Dr. Thomas Sowell, who recently had a conversation and was going over the welfare state and the current state of the black community in America. I want to go over the video a little bit just so we could clarify and have a full discussion about how I agree and disagree with some of the points that he made. And really overall, I just feel like he's not really, and most of these pundits aren't really going over the real situations. They're just repeating talking points and things that everyone is aware of. But some of the harder points, we never have topics about or conversations about. And so I wanted to just kind of point out some of the things that I agree with, some of the things that I disagree with, and some of the things that I thought that they should have covered and maybe even talked about a little bit, so that we can actually have a discussion on how to fix the problems that clearly face the black community. So let's begin. First and foremost, I have to say that I agree with Dr. Sowell on the welfare state and how it's a detriment to the black community, and how the family structure is a very important part to raising a good child.
Most black children were being raised in two-parent families in 1960. 30 years after the liberal welfare state, the great majority of black children were being raised by single parents.
Yes.
How does that, by the way, we should note that Patrick Moynihan publishes the Moynihan Report in 1965.
Yes.
And he's alarmed because the illegitimacy rate among black families is 25% then. Now, among whites, it's over a third.
Yes.
Hispanics, it's over half. And among African Americans, it's over 70%. What's going on there?
Well, this is, again, this too, you find the same thing in Britain, you find it in France and Norway, you find it in the Western world. In fact,
The dissolution of the family structure.
Oh, yeah, there are any number of Western nations where 40% of the children are raised with only one parent.
Right.
At the extremes, compared to Asian countries, at the extremes, Iceland, it's 2 out of 3 children born are raised in a single-parent home. In South Korea, it's 1 out of 66.
Wow. Wow. And so, that's the welfare state?
Yes,
it is.
Oh, you're paying. You're creating a situation where if the first of all, you're creating a situation where if the man stays there, the government will not give the woman welfare, and if he leaves, it will. And so they're paying. When you pay people not to get married, more people don't get married.
Now, there are a lot of statistics that prove that a family that has both the father and the mother in the household yield a better citizen to our society. That I'm not disagreeing with. Now, I don't believe that the welfare system was built to incentivize single-family homes, but people, just like in all walks of life, they find the path of least resistance and they figure out how to game the system. Now, my background is in poker. I've been in the poker industry for over 15 years, so I can really see a very similar route to customers in the poker community and the black community with promotion. So whenever we come out with a promotion that's supposed to help make the game more fun and entertaining for the customers, someone always tries to figure out immediately how to game the system. How do I take advantage of this? How do I go through the path of least resistance in order to find the easiest way to get the money? And I feel like the same thing is happening in black communities and people on welfare. They look for the easiest way. And a lot of the times, the idea is if I have a single family home, the government will give me more money. And so that's why we find that as an incentive for this. Now, why is Thomas Sowell implying that all black families are on welfare and don't have fathers in the household because of gaming the system incentives? He doesn't even have one stat that says the percentage of households who receive welfare and how many of those are single parents. This is example one of curated stats to maintain a narrative. So people are seeking a way to game the system. I don't think the intentions of the government with welfare was to make black families become broken. But how humanity works and how I found it always to be in the poker community when it comes to putting out a promotion is people will always try to find a way to game the system. They will always try and find a way for the path of least resistance, the cheapest way to get the most money. And that's just human nature to me. My only problem is that Dr. Sowell is constantly implying that only the black community is taking welfare, which is false. That's not even a true statement. But he's implying that this is why the black community is bad or having a hard time in our society is because they're taking welfare. But the truth of the matter is, mostly white people take welfare. Since we are currently on the topic of welfare, why is it that the black community is so destroyed by the welfare state? Are they the main recipients of welfare in this country? Nope. But then who receives the most welfare? As you can see here, by far, it's white people. Nearly 40% of all food stamp recipients are white, and among the population that receives welfare, 43% are white. So why aren't the black communities doing better, and why aren't the white communities getting crushed? Now we have to look back at discriminatory laws that put black people in this hole. For the most part, I think everyone would agree that the natural reaction would be if the law and legislation made it so that black people were in a hole, then most likely law and legislation will be needed to get black people out of the hole.
The effort to close the gap again between African Americans and whites. Quote, 1984, quote, whites had created the problem, it was up to whites to fix it, and there was very little in the dialogue that treated blacks as responsible actors, close quote. Yes. Has that changed?
No, it has not.
Now, I do agree the black community has to do better. One thing I do agree with that Dr. Sowell is saying is that with the victim mentality can never lead to progress.
In other words, they cannot proceed as so many do, that good things happen automatically, but bad things are somebody's fault.
If you do not take ownership of your problems, then you'll never think you'll be able to fix it. But what about the problems that occurred by laws that were implemented and unfair to a certain group? Who's supposed to fix that? Those are real, true things that were not a victim mentality. These were literally things that kept people from being successful. Now, here are a few things that I believe, and one of the major issues that I believe that was brought up by legislation to keep the black family from growing wealth, getting educated, and also being targeted, help them to be targeted for crimes.
This is Levittown, Pennsylvania, a new suburban community of 60,000 people with its giant shopping center, winding lanes named for flowers and trees. It is fairly typical of communities all over America, where families are pursuing the American dream to give their children a better chance in life. Nearly all are young people. A large proportion are veterans. For many, it is the first house of their own, and it represents a major financial investment. In August 1957, Levittown, Pennsylvania attracted international attention as William Myers, Jr. and his family moved into the 3-bedroom house. They're very close to the Levittown norm, except in one respect. William Myers, Jr. and his family are Negroes in an all-white community.
If more colored are allowed to move in, Levittown is going to go downhill.
The only way that those developers could get the capital to do that was by going to the Federal Housing Administration. In order to get that approval, they had to commit never to sell a home to an African American.
The way this manifested itself was through the drawing of maps. Different neighborhoods were underwritten as being riskier or safer, and the principal component that determined riskiness or safety from a lending standpoint was ethnic and racial composition.
It was at that point that the real estate developers began to drop strings around areas. The local banker could choose who would get mortgages, where, so that we could not have gotten a loan out in the suburbs because those were whites only. The concept of a middle-class black only exists in the mind of a middle-class black. Everywhere else in the suburbs, you are that nigger family on the corner of Warren Road and Boulevard Way.
Now, redlining was something that was outlawed in the 1960s, and there were some rules put in place to help out with that in the 1970s. But how long does it take for something so deep-rooted in a community to be unrooted so that the community can grow and start building wealth?
How many generations would it take to get to rough equality in wealth across races? 7 generations. More than 200 years.
You see, redlining causes so many problems that block the growth of the community. The main one that stands out to me is education, and Thomas Sowell agrees.
Oh, that really is one of the moral outrages, that for many kids who are cut from a very poor background and whose parents may not have had much education, a decent education is the one thing they have to have a better life.
But with redlining, we can see that black people were put in neighborhoods and given all these hurdles to get over in order to succeed. Now, let's look at it this way. If my grandfather was redlined in his 20s in the 1950s, he was now in a neighborhood that had poor education opportunities, terrible jobs, but he's still going to want to raise a family. So now he starts to raise a family, which is my dad, and now my dad's in that same neighborhood who doesn't have great education systems, doesn't have good opportunities to work. And then I'm born now. Now, most likely, by this time in 1981, there's more freedom and more things for me by the time I get to 20, 30 years old. But the problem is that most likely I'm going to be starting off in a similar or the same neighborhood as my dad. So that puts me at a disadvantage as well. So that's where the problem lies, is that a lot of people feel like, all right, well, redlining has been abolished. It's no longer even a thing. But the thing is that you can't just rise out of that poverty immediately as soon as the law is lifted. It just doesn't make any sense for you to just assume that, oh, it's outlawed now in 1970. We're all good now. Everything's equal. That's nonsense. Now, like I stated before, now you guys are all understanding that redlining creates a gap in wealth and knowledge. Redlining creates underfunded schools, and they also create bad communities where people are poorer. And then we also know that poorer people commit more crimes than affluent people. So now those areas are easily targeted for police trolling and police pat downs and things of that nature. So redlining is doing way more. It's way more complex than just, oh, they're no longer redlining anymore, so it's all good. It doesn't make any sense that that's the thought process at all. Dr. Sowell even agrees. He talked about going through the Jim Crow system and how it was a crooked and unfair, rotten system. Dr. Sowell lived through Jim Crow and admitted how poor and rotten that situation was. He lived through it, and he knew that he was lucky to get out of it.
What I'm getting at is, you were of the generation that saw Jim Crow with your own eyes.
Oh, no question. No question. No, it was a rotten system.
And even Ben Shapiro acknowledges that laws created from the past clearly affect what's going on today.
Let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today.
It is certainly plausible that slavery and Jim Crow have affected how people's paths have gone in life and the circumstances of their birth. But the question is, how much? If we are going to change policy, and if we are going to effectuate change, shouldn't we be focused more on what are the bad policies today that specifically are keeping people down, and what behaviors can we change today to make our opportunities better, rather than focusing in on slavery or Jim Crow? The fact is that even if you buy into the entire narrative of systemic racism promoted by this video, it changes nothing, and the video is even acknowledging as much. To deny the effects of history would be idiotic. History obviously has consequences. And to deny that racism exists would be similarly idiotic. But to attribute every problem in American life to racism or inequity is to be foolish and counterproductive and not to make the world a better place.
Now, the thing that I have a problem with guys like Dr. Sowell, Ben Shapiro, and the likes is the fact that they brush over valid points. And then they have a but caveat to every single valid point and then move on to another topic that isn't even related to what the problem is that we're talking about at hand. Now, in turn, these guys are making groups of conservatives just believe, yeah, this is nothing. There's no problem here. They just need to do these things and everything will be fine. And that ignoring of the problems is where we get stuck. We need to reach critical mass. And by that I mean we need to have the acceptance that there were problems that were installed by legislation, by laws in communities, creating these problems, creating these wealth and education gaps. And just know that the only way we can change them is by the entire country coming together and saying, this is a problem, let's see how we can fix it. Let's fund these schools better. Let's give these other kids that are in poor neighborhoods the opportunity to be in good neighborhoods, schools. Not even necessarily move their families out of the neighborhood, the bad neighborhood. Just get them into good schools so they can get a good education. That's how I feel about it. So now we know that the racist laws that were implemented back before the 1960s are still affecting communities of today. But how do we fix it? Now, the first idea from the federal level was just to give welfare to the people and help them out in that way. But we know that it's not the real way to handle this situation.
Well, it doesn't ignore government. Even for the market to work, you have to have a government. As Europe discovered when the Roman Empire collapsed, and the economies collapsed also.
And I do agree that with Dr. Sowell that the government isn't the way to solve any of these problems. They never do the will of the people.
The government is not out there at the personification of the national interest.
Right.
They have their own interests, and the Labor Department was clearly an interest in keeping the minimum wage because that's their jobs and careers and power. But I guess one of the reasons would be that with the government you have surrogate decision makers, and they cannot possibly know as much as the individuals whose personal decisions have been preempted.
So if welfare isn't working, which like I said, I 100% agree it isn't, what do we do? Here's what Dr. Sowell says we should do.
Tom Sowell's view is get an education, stay married, and do your job, roughly.
Yeah.
All right.
Get an education, stay married, do your job, get to work. But we see that redlining prevents a lot of that from happening. Studies have shown that uneducated women have more babies out of wedlock. So we know this. We know that if you block the education, most likely you're going to make bad decisions. You aren't going to be a good decision maker. Redlining again, rearing its ugly head. Now Sowell goes on to say that you shouldn't blame others, which I agree with. But the thing that I don't understand is the fact that he knows for a fact that there are people who have had their hand in creating these problems. He knows that, but he's not acknowledging that. He's not saying that, yes, there were laws that created unfair educational systems and unfair wealth building opportunities. But he doesn't even cover those topics. He doesn't. None of these guys do.
You drop out of high school and do what? Go on welfare? Start cashing? No, you went to work. And you spent some of that money to buy some inexpensive encyclopedias.
Yeah.
It's complete nonsense. This guy is just thinking that his route to getting to where he got to is easily overcome the same way by everybody else. Like as if kids that are growing up in shitty neighborhoods are just going to be like, you know what? I know my school sucks and I don't really have much knowledge in how to grow my intelligence and understanding of life. So let me go buy some encyclopedias and start studying on my own, do some independent studies. Like, come on, man. That's not even how it works. It's so unrealistic. I mean, don't get me wrong. Some people will do it, like I said, but most people will not do that. Most people are just going to either get caught up in the bullshit in these neighborhoods of crime and drugs, selling drugs and using them, or they're going to work in these shitty jobs, find out that this is their life, and be upset and be angry, and then turn to life of crime again. So it's just, that's not even realistic. I mean, he's not even going over any statistics or anything, or talking about people that came from the same neighborhoods as he has and how they fared in this whole situation. He's just looking at himself, who is an anomaly. The dude's brilliant, but he's an anomaly, man. Not everyone can be what he is. That's just like saying, oh man, if you play basketball, just be Michael Jordan. Just be Michael Jordan. Do it. Get it done. Work hard and you'll be Michael Jordan. Fuck that. That ain't even real, man. Not even real.
He has the notion that, that good things happen naturally. And if there are bad things, it's because institutions, including civilization itself, have made these bad things happen. And of course, and I think that's really the implicit assumption behind a lot of things that are said on the left today. Why in my most recent book I go to a lot of trouble to show that in nature there's nothing resembling equal opportunity.
Now this is the richest part of the whole thing, is the nowhere in nature do we find equality. What the hell does that mean? So should we just not seek it out then? Should we just say, who cares? I know there were laws that made things unfair for people, but we're here now. Don't blame anybody else. Don't blame white people. Don't blame the government. Don't blame nobody. Just say fuck it, man. This is what it is. There's no fairness in life, so there shouldn't be fairness. Even though there were unfair things done to make it unfair for you, and laws and restrictions to make it unfair for you, don't worry about it. Nowhere else in nature do we find unfairness, so it's fine. Let's justify it. Nonsense, man. I just can't understand how he can and we should ignore the laws that put black communities in holes and just expect them to just climb out of these holes on their own. Like, just figure it out. Sorry it was like that, but good luck. Figure it out yourself. It's crazy. Shit is madness. The thing that I don't get is people want to say, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, but these people don't even have boots on. That's how bad it is. All these conservative pundits, they just continue to harp on the same useless policies that were implemented by the Democrats, and we're not even trying to find a solution. We're just saying, nope, that's dumb, and then nothing else. Like, that's madness. Like, how are we not working on an actual solution? If we still agree that this is a problem, and let's say the Democrats didn't come up with a proper solution, then what is the proper solution? Why aren't we discussing what the proper solution is? We just look at and see when problems happen, then we're like, see, throw our hands up. See, there you go. See, they're at it again. My only ask, and whenever I watch any of these videos by these conservative pundits, is let's talk about the real problems and let's talk about real solutions. I need you guys to also, when you're watching these videos, don't just nod your head and be stuck in that echo chamber. What's the actual solution? Let's not say this is the problem and then divert and start talking about a separate solution. Let's talk about real solutions, man. Come on. Like I said, the only way to reach equality is through reaching critical mass. We need to have everyone on board with finding that there are problems with equality and finding actual solutions. Maybe it's not through the government, but we're going to have to use the government with voting and get things changed and laws changed to help these situations. And now it's up to you. I'm Abe Mobley, and we got a country to save.